Hi guys, we're going to work on a pattern today that's very near and dear to my heart. We are going to be making knitted knockers. I use the patterns and instructions from the knittedknockers.org website, and I'll have links to the pattern in the description below this video. But this is a project I do to help women who've had breast cancer and have lost a breast or both breasts from mastectomies. And I make these and I give these out to women here in my community who can use them. So I make these by the dozens. And I thought, I'm going to show you how I do them. You can get the pattern from knittedknockers.org. I make all the different sizes. This is a C cup. This is a B cup. B cup. And I tag them. I put a little tag on them after I make them. I safety pin a tag and wash with delicates, and I just stick that little tag inside so I can remember what sizes they are. And then I take these to my doctor's office when I go to get my 6-month checkups. I had breast cancer, and every 6 months I go in for scans and tests. So I take a big batch of these and I give them both to my oncologist and to my breast surgeon, and they give them out to women in my community. And they go through them pretty fast, so I try and take them a big batch every 6 months. And they're fun to make. It's not a hard project to make, so I'll show you how I do them. I get all kinds of different color yarns, mostly neutral colors, but sometimes I like to throw in some bright colors as well. But this is the yarn I use for this project. You can look on the knittedknockers.org website, and they will give you a list of approved yarns that they've tested, and these yarns are soft and does not hurt your scar. The scar that's up against these will sit just inside your bra, up against your skin, and they won't hurt your scar. I'm using Cascade Yarns Ultra Pima cotton, 100% Pima cotton. I buy mine from Webs, which is yarn.com, and it goes on sale every couple of months. And I will get a big skein, about this size skein, and I can probably knit, I haven't exactly counted, but I can knit at least 5 or 6, depending on the sizes, but at least 5 or 6 knockers from one skein. So I buy some bright colors, and then I usually get mostly neutral colors. That's what most people want. So that's where I get my yarn. It typically runs, when it's on sale, it's about $7 for a pretty big size skein, which I didn't think is too bad. It has, let's see here, it has 220 yards. That's pretty good. And I use a size 5 knitting needle. I'm going to use, in this video, I'm going to show you how I do mine. It's a little different than their pattern in that I use 2 circular needles to knit mine in the round. The pattern on the website calls for DPNs, double pointed needles, and I prefer to work with circular needles instead. So I'll show you how I work the exact same pattern that's on their website, except I convert it to 2 circular needles. So let's get started. Alright, so what you're going to need for this project is the cotton. This is Ultra Pima cotton that I've wound into a skein or into a ball. I use 2 different stitch markers, 2 different ones, 2 different color ones, and I'll tell you why I do that in a minute. But I have a purple one and a white one, and then I have 2 circular needles that are size 5. This yarn is DK weight, so I use a size 5, and the pattern does give you instructions on how to use a size 4 needle and sport weight yarn. This is DK weight. So I use size 5 needles. So let me show you how I get started. The pattern calls for, no matter what size knocker you're going to make, you always start the same with the same amount of stitches. So you're going to cast on 15 stitches. So let me do that here real quick. So I have a good long tail. When you're finished with these knockers, let me show you this tail real quick before we get started. It's tucked in here. I tuck the tail in. but you want to leave, when you're finished with your knocker, you want to leave about a 10-15 inch tail, and the instructions will show you how to catch the stitches here, so that when you give these out to people, if they want to cinch up that hole, they can pull on the tail and it will cinch up that hole. So you want to leave the tail so that they can be tightened. So I'm going to just loosen what I just tightened. I'm going to loosen that. So that's when you start this thing, you want to leave a good long tail just for that reason. So I want to leave at least a good 12 to 15 inches. So that's about right to there. And now I'm going to cast on 16 stitches, even though the pattern calls for 15. So I'll tell you why here in a minute. So I need a little bit of extra yarn for the cast on of 15 stitches. And then I'm going to put my slip knot. You can make a slip knot any which way that you know how. So let's do this, get this started. So I have my tail, and then I have my thread going back to the yarn, and I have my 2 color stitch markers. And I'm going to do a long tail cast on, and I'm going to cast on, like I said, I'm going to cast on 16 stitches, even though the pattern calls for 15. I'll show you why. So there's my first stitch, is my cast on stitch. And now I'm going to add stitches. So that's 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm not doing it super tight. 5, 6, 7, 8. Let me go in real close if you want to see this up close, what I'm doing. That was 8. 9. 10. 11. 12. 13. 14. 15, which is what the pattern calls for, and I add 1 extra stitch. And the reason I do that is because I'm going to be joining this yarn. I'm going to bend it in half right here in the middle, and I'm going to join this so it's in the round. And I take the very last stitch, that extra stitch, and I'm going to move this extra stitch over here. And then my very first stitch, when I start working in the round, my very first stitch, I'm going to do a knit 2 together. And that creates the join where these will start working in the round. And by knitting 2 stitches together, it makes the join stronger and it just looks neater. So I'll show you that when we get there. So I have my 16 stitches on one end of my needle, and like I said, I'm going to put these on 2 needles. So I'm going to start from this end, our cast on edge, our very first stitch. I'm going to start from this edge, and I'm going to take off half the stitches. I'm going to take off half the stitches and put them on my second needle. So I'm going to slide all these stitches down to the other end of my needle. And I'll have links in the description below of the needles I'm using and the size needles and length of the cord. So I'm going to slide all these stitches down here to the very bottom. And now I'm going to pick up my second circular needle, my second needle, and I'm going to take off half the stitches. And I'm going to start adding my stitch markers here. I'm going to add my first stitch marker. So if you read the instructions for the double pointed needles, they want you to use 3 double pointed needles, and each double pointed needle should start with 5 stitches on each needle. So like I said, I'm not using double points, but I want to follow those instructions, but I'm going to use circulars. I'm going to use the stitch markers to denote the 3 double pointed needles. So I'm going to put 5 stitches for each, representing for each double pointed needle. So I'm going to move 5 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I'm going to add my first marker, which is my purple marker. I use a purple marker, a colored marker, for my very first marker because that helps me know where I'm at on the round when I start working in the round. So I always know that the stitches leading up to the purple marker is my first stick or my first DPN. So when I'm following the instructions, whenever it says DPN number 1, I know that's all the stitches up to my purple marker. And then I'm going to just move 2 more stitches over, so that's about half. So that's about half. And I'm going to move, now that I have about half the stitches over here and half the stitches over here, now I'm going to put my second stitch marker on, and I'm going to start working in the round here. Right now they're still split, but I'm going to work in the round. So in order to start working in the round, I need to have my stitches over here where my yarn is. My yarn is coming off of this last stitch. So in order to work it, I need to slide both sticks. I need to slide the stitches all the way down across the cord back onto the other side of the needles. So I'm sliding both sets of stitches all the way down to this part of the needle. And now I'm going to very gently turn this around so that I can move my stitch to do my join, and then I can start knitting. So this very last stitch, that extra stitch, I'm going to take that stitch and move it from this needle onto this needle, and that will connect right here, and then I can start working in the round. So I move my stitches very carefully up to the tips. I hold the yarn that goes back to the ball, I hold that over here in my hands just to kind of get it out of my way. And I'd kind of do the same thing with the tail. I kind of hold it back over here so it's not in my way. And then I just manually grab that last stitch, make it a little bit bigger, and I just take it off and flip it over onto that other needle, and then I tighten it up. So now I've got 2 stitches right here that I'm going to knit 2 together, that very first stitch. So I'm done using, for now, I'm done using the stitches here on this bottom needle. So I'm going to pull the bottom needle so that just the cord is running through. And now these are the stitches I'm going to start knitting on. They're already up here on the needle. This is my first double point, so to speak, my first double point up to the purple. So we're gonna start knitting. Now when I knit mine, I always start, my very first round is a knit round. I don't do any increases. The pattern calls to start doing increases right away. I have found that it's just easier for me to start my increases on round 2 rather than on the very first cast on round. You can certainly do increases from the beginning, but I'm going to knit 1 round and then start my increases. So my very first stitch, I'm going to go into the 2 stitches. I'm going to make sure I've picked up both of those stitches and I knit them together. So that's my very first stitch. I tighten everything up a little bit, tighten it up, and now I'm just going to knit all the way around. So I should have 5 stitches, which I do, 3, 4, 5. Then I slip the marker over, and then I'm going to knit these last 2 stitches. So I have two of my 5 stitches, 2 of the 5. Then I'm going to flip this around and pull, since I just knitted these stitches, I'm going to pull the cord through those, and now these stitches that I haven't worked yet, I'm going to pull them onto the needle because I need to work them next. So I'm going to pull those up onto the needle that they're on. And they're a little tight just because we tend to cast on tighter than what we actually knit. So now I'm going to add a marker, my second marker, to this side. So I had 2 stitches here, and I want to have 5 stitches between the markers. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Add my second marker, and now I should have 5 stitches left for my third quote-unquote double-pointed needle. So now I've knit all the way around on 15 stitches, and now I'm going to start the instructions.